Hey everybody, welcome to Geeksvana Live. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, this afternoon or morning, wherever you are in the world, depending on what time it is with you. Tonight, we're going to be talking about quite an interesting topic. We're going to be talking about the CAA's Drone Awareness Tracker, which was released in April 2023. So this is hot off the press, as it were. And this is basically a report. I won't pre-describe things too much because we're going to go into this in the show. But this is essentially a report where they've asked a set number of public and drone users their opinions and some facts and information about their drone use, or what they think about drones, what their perception is. And this, of course, is one of those documents, one of those pieces of information that feeds the CAA in terms of basically letting them know where their messaging needs to change, where their messaging's working, not working, that type of thing. So it's going to be a really interesting one to pick through. We do have tonight some clips from an interview that I've pre-recorded with Jonathan Nicholson, if I can say his name correctly. Kind enough to come on the show, and I can't even say his name. Jonathan Nicholson, who is one of the comms people for the CAA, and Jonathan has very kindly come on the channel again to talk through this. So we have a few clips. I think for a moment, we lost internet. And let me just make sure that we're back online. Can everybody see us now again? Waiting for it to come back. Waiting for it to come back. Hey, we're back. Okay, Minty FPV. Thank you, Minty. Yes, so we are back. Sorry about that. Everything went off for a moment there. I think for some reason we lost internet, but there we go. Perhaps it was someone doesn't want us to talk about this report. One of those kind of gremlins behind the scenes. I still actually blame John Coopy. So John Coopy, if you're watching, it's all your fault, frankly. So yes, so we're going to be talking about that today. We're going to intersperse the clips from the interview with Jonathan. But first of all, I'm going to bring in my esteemed co-host. Or actually, no, the esteemed co-host wasn't available. So here's Graham.
Thank you.
How are you, sir?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm fine, thank you. In the immortal words of Sting, love is the seventh wave. I say, love is the seventh wave. I don't know if any of you will remember that. Apparently, this is the 8th wave of the drone awareness tracker, and I didn't know that surveys were measured in the unit of measure wave.
Is the spade where you dug that old joke up from the back garden? Is it out of arm's length? I don't want you dig.
I'll hose it down later.
Yeah, I don't want you digging up any more old jokes, frankly. But very good, sir. Very good. So that's.
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, this is one of those publications by the CAA.
Yes,
where I'm convinced I've read one in the past, probably a couple of years ago, possibly pre-COVID. But at the time, it sort of didn't mean anything to me because I was just too busy getting on with the day job and doing droney stuff, and this didn't mean anything. So it's fascinating to sort of come back now and sort of see how things have changed and actually have an interest in it. It's
it's a very interesting report, hence one that I felt compelled enough to reach out to the CAA and chat to them about, but also bring on this channel and talk about as well. There are some very, very interesting statistics which we're going to pick through as well as the show goes on, so do stay tuned for that. But first of all, we're going to start off with our first snippet of an interview with Jonathan Nicholson from the CAA. This one's about 2 minutes long, so enjoy, and we'll see you in a minute. Okay, Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us again on Geeksvana. It's good to have you back in the hot seat. How are you?
Yes, fine, thank you. Sure, everything all right?
Yeah, good, thank you very much. We're very much looking forward to discussing this particular topic, which of course is CAP 2546 to give it its CAP number, but otherwise known as the CAA Drone Awareness Tracker. Could you explain what this document is to the audience, please?
Yeah. So I'm trying to get people to stop calling things by the CAP numbers, Sean, because it gets like kind of cliquey. You know, we want people to be able to understand what they are without deciphering some mad reference number. So I'll let you off. So basically, every year we do a survey of the general public and drone users. It's a professionally run survey by a proper professional survey company to make it all above board, and they do it so it can actually be a proper profile of the UK, if you like, rather than just us going out and asking a handful of friends or something. So it's all very appropriate. And yeah, so we want to do particularly when we do our safety promotion and education work, and not just in the RPAS drone world, but across everything we do, we try to evaluate it afterwards. It's never a precise science, because it's really hard to get people's understanding and reach people to get kind of, it's not something you can say, give them an equation and get an answer out of it. It's a lot of it is feel and what people remember and that kind of stuff. And to be honest, we're not spelling anything. So I always say, if people get the message, I don't care whether it comes from us or whether it comes from you or whether it comes from whoever, as long as people get the safety messages, that's fine. So this is really a kind of a gauge of the UK and how everybody is understanding it. And it enables us to say, year on year, how successful have we been at getting that message to people? And also we alter some of the questions every year as well. So the core is a tracker that enables us to look at progress. But then if we've got a specific thing, like when we introduced registration, we had a couple of questions after registration, and you'll see we've got something again this year on registration to try and track. So there's some that we'll alter based on what other people want us to ask, basically. Yeah, and just keep it rolling.
Okay, so that's a great little introduction, Jonathan, as far as what this actual document is supposed to be. Now, we'll look very quickly before we play the next clip out. We'll look at the objectives of the study. As it says, this is the 8th wave of the drone awareness tracker, which continues to evolve and explore different topical areas amongst the general public and drone users. Our key objectives remain: to track one, the changes in awareness and recall of the rules when flying a drone in the UK, awareness of the registration requirement when flying a drone in the UK, to explore and understand one, barriers to registration, two, awareness, perceptions and attitudes towards drone regulation and safe use, three, attitudes to future uses of drones, and four, exploring how the CAA can motivate more drone registers, more drone owners to register. Now, in overall terms, those are decent objectives to have, aren't they? In terms of actually a regulator and a report. This report's carried out by a company called Opinium on behalf of the CAA. I mean, they're decent objectives to have, aren't they? To know if the messaging is getting out there, and to know what things like the barriers to registration are and that type of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, this can only be a tool for them to give them information, and then you hope that once they've got the information, they do the right things with it. And I think that's the key thing: is what will they do with that information? What will we see differently over the next 12 months that is different because of the results of this survey? If the answer is very little or nothing, then don't bother with the survey next year, guys. Spend your money on something else.
Exactly, because I think it is very much one of those things where we have to start seeing some kind of change. Otherwise, because again, I think you can find out a lot of what's going on, and a lot of these things which are coming up on this report, you can actually get a lot of that from focus groups of existing users who would be very happy to come forward. Now, as far as who they asked and how they asked, that's actually the next clip. So I'm going to play that one out next, and then we'll talk about that. And we'll actually come back and chat all about this tile, which I found very, very interesting as well. So let's listen to the next clip. So I noticed it's around 2,000 adults who are surveyed. What is that made up of? Is that 2,000 drone users or non-drone users, or?
Yeah. So we do almost two audiences in one. That makes sense. So if you go to a professional opinion research company, so the people we use, Opinium, they're one of the top research companies for consumer research. So these are the kind of companies that when you see something that says, 29% of people said they valued this, makeup brand or product or whatever, they're all based on those kinds of research. So you could be, they're used by political parties, big car manufacturers, food, everything, every kind of consumer survey are done by these companies. You have to do 2,000 people as a minimum for it to be applicable as rolling across the whole UK population.
Okay.
So it's obviously percentages. So if you're doing it for America, you need way more than 2,000 people, but based on the population of the UK, if you survey 2,000 people, you can say that then statistically applies to the UK population. You can read that across if you like. If you don't do 2,000, you can't say that.
Right.
And then obviously some of those 2,000 may be drone users, some of them may not, we don't know. But that's why we also go and do 350 drone users, so we can then separately say, okay, this is what the general public think, this is what drone users think. So we can absolutely say, and that 350 again is a percentage of what we think a drone user is to be able to read across for the population. So obviously it's a smaller number.
Yes.
They're not our contacts, so to make it completely professional, above board, and be able to say this is a proper piece of research, these are the contacts, these are the people that the research company have on their database. So all of these research companies have a huge database. So if you're a car manufacturer and you go to them and you say, I want to survey the general public to see what they think about hybrid cars, so they would do 2,000 members of the general public from their database, from random, if you like. They've got tens and tens of thousands of people on their database. And you might also say, and I want the same view from SUV owners, because we're thinking about making a SUV hybrid, for example. And on their database, they can say, right, tick a box. I also want 350 SUV owners. And because they will have, out of their tens of thousands of people on their database, they obviously record all their interests, their work, their profile, their family, whatever, So you can say, I want SUV owners in Essex that like blue cars or something. They would be able to pull those people from their database. So they're not our contacts. We give them we ask them to speak to no specific people. We say 2,000 random members of the public, 350 drone users from their database. So we don't know how proficient, professional, or whatever those drone users are. They are people that have told them they have a drone and they use it.
Excellent.
So
that's really interesting.
Could be anybody.
Yeah. So that's interesting, isn't it, in terms of the people that are actually surveyed. So looking at this tile here, which backs up obviously what Jonathan's saying, you can see that the split was 52% male, 48% female, and you can see quite a mixture there in the ages, although most were 55 plus, which I think will probably. I find that interesting as well. And then you can see.
No, sorry, can I jump in? Yeah. I think most were 35 to 54. 45% of them. Sorry,
55 wrong. Plus are 44%. Stay in your box.
We'll be having a fight later on that.
Well, I'm looking at the stats here. 18 to 34 is 25%. 35 to 54 is 32%. 55 plus is 44%.
Now, isn't that interesting? Because I've got on the link you sent me, I've got different numbers.
On which page?
On page 4.
Where are we? Oh, yeah, you're looking at drone users. I'm looking at public.
My apologies.
Yeah.
I'm completely
always trust
wrong.
The host.
Always trust the host. Yes. Now I'm with you, right?
So yes,
sorry, everyone.
So of the public 2,000 people aged 18 plus, that is the split down, and it's a 15-minute online interview. And of on top of that, there are 500 drone users, which is a boost, which again is a 15-minute interview, and that's where the predominant age was 35 to 54 of 45% of people. Years experience using a drone on average was 2.5 years. Frequency of flying per month was 6 times a month, and their reasons for flying were for fun 79%, photography 46%, and for work 14%. Now, you have to draw a line somewhere, and I understand that. I really do understand that. I'm not entirely convinced that 500 drone users and 2,000 members of the public is enough data to base what the public, and I understand, you know, that's the industry standard, that's the sample, that if you have 2,000 you can now say that, but please, when you're watching this, please do take that in mind in terms of you know, this isn't 100,000 people surveyed or something. This is a proportionate and worked up, and you know, you can take those stats on things like, you know, I suppose voting polls and that type of thing, etc. And you know, you don't know if people are telling the truth when they answer these things and that type of thing, and you don't know what's going on, basically. So the numbers I would like to see is slightly higher. It is the bare minimum, but yes, but yeah, it is the data that they want, as they're saying. So and then but again, this is interesting statistics from the point of view that it is very much the kind of people we want to hear from, i.e. the public and also drone users. Now, my next question to Jonathan was actually, who was this intended for? So we're going to listen to that clip, and then we're going to play a little bit more with the figures. Who is this information intended for in terms of use case? Obviously, it's going to be used, I presume, internally for the CAA to be able to indeed track exactly how the message is penetrating the audience. But is this something which is used by other government agencies and departments?
Yeah, so when we first did them, the first couple of years we did them, we actually did quite a bit of publicity for them. If you remember the Drone Safe website,
yes,
we had, they were on there, and the first couple were on there all the way until we turned the Drone Safe website off, what, a year and a half ago, something like that. But no one was really interested in them beyond kind of the kind of classic people we gave them to. So obviously we give them to the Department for Transport, you know, NAPs have had them, other people that we deal with regularly have had them. But yeah, I mean, we've never kept them a secret. If anybody asks, we've been sending them out to people. It's just, yeah, we thought we'd test the water again after a good few years and see if anybody else was interested in it, in seeing it again. But yeah, I mean, primarily it's for us to be able to track our work. And also, you'll see when you get a little bit further on in it as well, we ask questions of the general public about their acceptance for new technology and innovation as well, which gives us a bit of guidance on that as well. So it's not just tracking sort of what we're doing, it's tracking what the general public like or would accept.
Yes. Which of course, with things like drone delivery, etc., is going to feed into the challenges that you have ahead of you in terms of BV loss regulations and that type of thing. Because I know noise is a massive part of that whole world at the moment in terms of trying to find out what's acceptable. And because of course, if you can put something together that the public accept, then you know you're 80% there, basically, frankly. So
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So that's really interesting in terms of so the data really is used. This is one of the things which they count upon to tell them what's happening with their messaging. It is something which is circulated internally and then to other government departments, etc. So it is truly a working document in every sense of the word from that point of view of providing real data. Now, the executive summary I found quite interesting. So this is the overall summary of this report. So the first point is that the awareness of the height restriction for flying a drone has increased amongst drone users and is now the highest level since the research started 8 years ago.
Well, I was about to say it's the highest. It's at almost 120 meters.
Well, yes, exactly. And which I think the 400 feet thing, the 120 meter thing, whichever one you choose, I think that is pretty much a well-known number, and I think it is one of the ones. It is one of the successful messages, and I think because it's used worldwide almost now, it is one of those ones that people really do know about, and it's an important one as well to keep us away from manned aviation, etc. 2, there is less clarity over the requirements of drone tests and registrations for drone owners. Large proportions of users believe drone tests and registration are just for large drones, and there is little knowledge of what flyer IDs and operator IDs are. More education and communication around this is needed. Now, I find that interesting because, and we will talk about it because we will come on to the actual stats that back this up in a little bit, but when we talk about registration specifically, but this to me is the issue when you have something that's called DMARES, so it's the Drone and Model Aircraft Registration Education Scheme, so it's the drone registration scheme, but you don't actually register a drone. You register yourself as an operator with an operator ID, and then you also then register yourself as a flyer, if required, with a flyer ID. So it's kind of like, everyone knows what drone registration is, so we're going to call it that. But then we're going to do a system that actually isn't drone registration, and then you're then surprised when people don't understand it.
I've got to say, I frequent the darker, deeper reaches of Facebook, and the last week, I suspect because the weather's improving and people are finding the drones that they got for Christmas and starting to think about these things, the number of questions asked about drone registration. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with people going onto a Facebook group and asking, do I need to register this drone? Because as Sean says, that's the implication from the name of the thing.
Yeah.
What is surprising is all of the really knowledgeable answers from the group of people who have been registered, presumably for some time, who still think that you have to pass a test to register a drone or to get your operator ID. And it is a mess. And it's also a mess on the website, where if you go to register, you'll be thrown automatically into the flyer ID bit, and actually trying to just do the flyer ID without registration because the timing of them has slipped for whatever reason it's a nightmare because I had to do it, in March, April time.
So, but we'll come back to registration in just a moment. Let's just pick up on the other parts of the executive summary. So, number 3, the number of drone users register continues to drop, including those who have registered in the last 12 months. Barriers to registration are a lack of awareness of the requirement, which are fine, if you don't know, you don't know, as well as not seeing any benefit in doing so, which I find that's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Motivators for registration would be if the police start issuing fines, as well as if users were granted access to fly in more places. News on drones is also welcome, and there is an interest in receiving this from the CAA. Again, no great surprise there. And number 5, the biggest growth area for commercial drone use is considered to be in deliveries and travel.
Yeah, I know.
With the general public expecting both services to continue to grow over the next 20 years. Now, it's interesting because it's the responses they got, and well done Opinion for getting, obviously these companies are very forensic in how they go about things to ensure that they don't corrupt the data, etc. But that's an interesting one, that the executive summary from both the drone users and public is that deliveries and travel are the ones that are considered to be the biggest growth areas.
Yeah, I mean, there's an odder one we'll come to, because we won't be able to resist mentioning it.
We won't. No, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, but basically, what that says is people read the newspapers, and what gets stories are drone deliveries, delivering ice creams, pizzas, you name it. They'll deliver it.
That's it. So the PR from a very small amount of what's actually happening in the industry is so big that actually that's what people think are going to happen. So the vaporware air taxis and the Amazon Prime tube sock deliveries, as someone's saying in the chat, Tailspin RC, is very much the things that are in the public's mind, which just really does show how lobbying and a bit of marketing, how that really does help, doesn't it? Basically,
it's what they've been told the drones will be used for.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay. Up next, the next clip, and we're going to talk about a really chunky one here, and then get onto a chunky part of this report, is actually discussing with Jonathan regarding the whole registration question. Interesting one. The report suggests that people flying, around 33% of them stated that they're not registered. And that the report also suggests that the number of users who are registered is dropping, but the number of users overall isn't, basically. So it suggests that the number of people that are actually renewing their registration is increasing. Again, not necessarily for nefarious reasons, because obviously, as we were just saying, occasional users will have the drone sat there and will just forget to renew it, and or I'm sure some people will make a judgment call that I've flown it once in a year, I don't need to register it for that. Of course, we know that's not correct, but there's all sorts of reasons why that happens. Is that something which would change anything in terms? I mean, obviously you're saying the fact that you're trying to change in terms of showing some benefits to being able to be registered, and I know that was one of the bits of the feedback in the survey as well, that people didn't see a benefit to registering beyond the legal obligation. Is that why you're running campaigns like that then, to try and sort of show extra benefits essentially?
Yeah, and also kind of remember, we ask the question sometimes to justify what we're planning on doing. So one of the reasons we asked about benefit is because we had an idea of how we could show the benefit. So yeah, we wanted to, before we roll out the campaign showing a bit more about what benefits of being registered are, we wanted to check that actually that was important to people.
Yes.
So it's kind of almost like a assessment, if you like. So it's sometimes when you do surveys, you ask a before and after. So before we did registration, we asked some questions about registration, so we could then gauge that afterwards in a few years' time when we ask the same question. So there's an element of that there as well. So there's always kind of a little bit of a test we try and do beforehand. And sometimes, because a lot of trying to reach some of the Joe Public audience as well, a lot of it is great stuff we can do through the national media. So you probably see in the media, you see these PR, I work in PR and I call them PR puff stories. You see these PR puff stories, as I refer to them, where somebody's obviously got a story in the media based on some survey, 20% of people said they'd rather miss match of the day than whatever, So, we do a bit of that as well in this. That enables us to then go to some of those national media people with a kooky survey and and try and get a
headline percentage that will draw a story for them, as it were. No, that's good.
Absolutely. Okay.
So that's interesting in terms of and we're gonna go through the registration tiles ourselves now as well. Just very quickly, of the nearly 200 people watching, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. I really appreciate it. Could you all just hit that like button, as it will help the algorithm tell yet more people to come in and have some fun with us looking at this particular report. I really do appreciate you all being here. But if you could hit that like button, I would really appreciate it. Right, next up, awareness of registration requirements also remains in line with 12 months ago. Okay, so awareness of drone owners being required to register themselves. So the public one is very much plateaued around the 40%. Okay, fine. They're perhaps not going and seeking it and that type of thing.
Why would they know? Yeah. Why would they need to know?
I don't know whether I would call, 1% lower, I suppose, isn't much of a change. But when you go a year or two before that with this one on the right hand side here with the drone users, we're talking about a drop from 72% to 62% in 4 years.
A 10% drop is when something should be becoming more familiar.
Well,
to the group.
But you're also talking about almost the entirety of the time that drone registration is in place.
Yeah.
So for the entirety of the time that drone registration has been in place, we have been losing ground in terms of the messaging to existing drone users that they need to be registered. Now, I think part of that is probably due to the type of drone user that we're attracting. I've talked about this a bit on the channel before, where we're now starting to see people who are very occasional users who will buy their drone from the stereotypical Mini 2 purchaser from Argos. And it's the same as them buying a new camera. They don't see it as a hobby. They don't see it as something which needs registering or anything else like that. They're just going to throw it up on Bournemouth Beach during an air show and get themselves in trouble. That kind of thing is where it's at as well, I think. But in terms of messaging, it doesn't feel good to see things dropping by an entire 10%. Also, the fact that it's an entire 10% of that entire time that Geeksvana has been going as well. Actually, I feel quite offended.
And over a period, so you should, over a period when AI and just not the old pre-AI algorithms, if there was such, has made it easier to target the sort of people who might buy a drone. So photographers might buy a drone for doing
it does suggest that they definitely need to sort of re-aim where their things where things are hitting. Okay, the next one is only just over half of the users are aware that drones under 250 grams need to be registered with the CAA. So excluding toys, do the operators of drones that weigh under 250 grams and have a camera need to be registered with the CAA? And obviously here we have 35% in 2022, 36% in 2023, and with drone users 60% down to 56%. So It's again, I suppose if you're having deteriorating numbers and you're having poor numbers on this one, then this one is going to follow suit, of course. But do you think this is partly down to the fact that we have this whole, if it's sub 250, you don't need flyer ID, but you do need operator ID, and that gets a little bit more confusing for people?
Yeah, the number of, well, yeah, and we've said, haven't we, that essentially flyer ID ought to be the base level for anybody, because if nothing else, it protects you from not knowing what law you might be breaking.
Yeah, I mean, so, I'm not sure I would personally put it that way. I always put it the way that flyer ID, yes, I think it is a good minimum, but actually I think the A2 is a good minimum. But anyway, it's a whole other conversation. But I do think flyer ID is basically you signing. I don't know how much it teaches people personally, and I feel like it is you signing to say, I know I'm breaking the rules when I then break the rules, if that makes sense. So again, the benefit versus cost, sort of the cost versus benefit type of weighing up of getting a flyer ID, I feel is still towards the whole sort of you're basically signing to say you know what's going to happen.
But for whatever reason, not having to have it in a certain category just complicates this bit, doesn't it?
It does.
The number of times I see people cut and paste the little chart that shows toy, not a toy, camera, operator ID, flyer, little graph, and the arguments that people have over that, when it's clear cut, but it's only clear cut if you understand it. If you sort of live and breathe the regulations, you understand these things and you understand why and where it comes from.
Yeah.
But if you don't, the endless hours wasted in Facebook groups arguing over this amongst people who care. So imagine if you don't care.
Exactly.
It's just a hassle.
Okay, the next one is registration has decreased. So let me just start that again. Registration has decreased amongst drone users, and not all of those who have registered have done so in the last 12 months. So have you registered with yourself as a drone user with the CAA? So the yes, no things there. Again, we seem to have quite a good take up in 2020. 2021 looks good. 2022 was a bad year, but we do seem to now have had a more significant jump. And again, when we went through the stats of who they spoke to, we're not necessarily talking about people. There will be people that have their drones in a cupboard and just don't get them out anymore, of course. But people were flying an average of 6 times. They've been flying for 2.5 years. That kind of thing. So we're talking about fairly active users here on average, and that's up to 53% of drone user isn't registered.
It's it should be scary to the CAA, I would say. It sort of, I don't know if there are that many problems with drones that are being sold by registration, so I'm not scared, and it doesn't worry me. I'm registered, but it really ought to worry the people who thought registration had to be brought in, because there is a real earth-shattering reason to have it.
Well, so this top number, the 47%, then extrapolates across to registration with the CAA within the last 12 months. Yes, 77%, 33% no. My problem with that is if they haven't registered in the last 12 months, then they're not registered. So is that telling us that 33% of that 47% also isn't registered?
Not in the last 12 months, and therefore no, they are not registered, presumably. So yeah, 47% have at some point registered with the CAA,
but only 77% of them are active.
Yeah.
So that, in terms of a headline figure, that 53% should actually be a chunk higher in terms of all of them who holds a current. And this is all about what you ask people, isn't it? This is all about the questions you ask and therefore the answers you gain. And I'm not necessarily saying I think that's been hidden there, but I'd say that's slightly concerning. Certainly. Almost all of those registered intend to register again when it needs renewing. Okay, that's good. Have you registered yourself as a drone user? Again, we've got all this 43%.
But strange that they haven't registered in the last 12 months.
Yeah, well, 33% of them haven't.
If you look at those two graphs.
So of that 47%, 97% are likely to register. But they didn't, did they? But they didn't. They didn't register. So Yeah, an interesting one. Now, of course, what this starts to crack down on is things like how we're actually reaching these messages, which is the next clip I'm going to play in a few minutes. But first of all, I want to look at this tile as well, which is failure to register is down to being unaware of registration requirement, as well as not seeing a benefit of doing so. Which, okay, personally, I find a little bit incredible because the benefit is that you're legal. It's kind of like, what's the benefit of having a driving license? Well, I'm not going to get fined. I'm not going to get banged up and have my car repossessed and all of those other kinds of things. And again, they've, as if they want to really hammer it home to CAA, they've again repeated these columns here of the have you register. Now, reasons for not registering. I didn't think I had to register. 43%, 52, 30 in the corresponding years. So that's gone down a bit since last year. There's no benefit. That is obviously a new question because it's non-applicable. 18% of the people said there's no benefit. I haven't got around to doing it. Okay, so that's the lazy people. I don't know how to register. Okay, surprising, but again, small numbers. I don't want to, and I don't want to be tracked. And then other. And other, maybe they should put I watched XJet's video or something.
The ones who don't want to be tracked, are they using their mobile phone as their device?
Yeah. Well,
we know
we can't go down that particular rabbit hole this evening, but yes, yeah.
So it looks as though in the last two surveys, they've asked other, and they've probably said what is the other, and at some point enough of people have said there's no benefit for it to become a new question.
Yes,
I would suspect. And it's jumped in with quite a lot, hasn't it? I mean, it's that 18% is as high as any other questions.
Yeah, no, indeed.
And it's kind of what, as you say, what benefit do you expect? I mean, you get a nice, you can put a sticker on your drone. I mean, it's and you're legal. So
yeah, it's an interesting one.
Not everything has a benefit.
No.
Something you have to do.
Yeah. Although as Jonathan said in one of the clips, which I'm not sure it's part of the ones we played yet, that they are actually looking at increasing the benefits of registering, which I think is interesting because they are trying to answer some of those. So I suppose it is showing they're using the data. Okay, I'm going to play another clip, but then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the whole operator ID, flyer ID awareness thing because I think that's really interesting. And this particular clip, we talk about budgets and how can we reach more people, basically. Two-stage question here, and you'll see the relevance of the first bit in the second bit. But there was a recent Freedom of Information release that shows the income and profit in terms of the CAA. And within that, obviously, there is the RPAS sector, the drone, as my audience will know, the drone sector, which is making a decent profit. In 2020, 2021, it was 1.3 million. And in 2021, 2022, that dropped to 576,000, but still, it's still one of the few areas of in terms of charges coming in that there is a profit being made within the CAA. Obviously, because of course it's such a growing marketplace. Is there a specific fund available in terms of the education of drone users? But by that, I mean in terms of being able to run campaigns like the Atoll campaign. Because, for instance, I've often thought that running something like an Atoll style campaign on the drone side of things would actually be very, very successful because I think the Atoll campaign is superb. I think it really does get to its audience, and I think that it's at the point now where you can just tweet a few words, around it. If it's in the news that there's some flights that have been delayed or cancelled, sure enough, the CAA will tweet up very quickly, hey, if you've been messed around this bank holiday, here's what you can do. And I think that there's a very good penetration in terms of the messaging around Atoll. Is there any plans for having something similar to that in drones, from the point of view that there's clearly funds coming in from the drone community to pay for that kind of education system, which we would benefit from. Is there any plans for that?
Yeah, so we've for a few years now we've had a portion of that, not as much as we spend on Atoll. But obviously Atoll's reaching millions and millions and millions of people, and obviously with Atoll as well, you get all the support through the big tour operators. So people like TUI and all the others, British Airways Holidays, Virgin Atlantic Holidays, they're all in there promoting Atoll as well because it's in their benefits to do that. So we don't so much get that with the drone world. You don't get DJI pitching up and going, you should all register with the CAA, or don't forget the rules in the drone code. And we don't have that so much. It's purely whatever we do. So yes is the answer. So I do have a portion of money. So, we always say to drone communities, exactly the same with the private side, with the general aviation community, we always, in the nicest possible way, if they say, well, I paid £70 for a license, but actually all you did was put that in the computer, print that out and send it to me. It's kind of like, yeah, but it's all the other stuff you're paying for out of that as well.
Yes.
So, every time somebody is paying something for RPAS, drone funding, it's not just for that transaction, if you like. It's for the other stuff we do. So, if we go along and present. So in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to we were asked to go to the Welsh National Photo Show with their little drone stand and help educate people, because there's going to be a drone section there as well. So, they asked us to go, but we've got to pay for floor space.
Yes, indeed.
We've got to pay to get our stuff there. I've got to pay for my train fare to get there. I've got to pay for my dinner in the evening. It's a bit all.
How dare you?
I know. McDonald's is very cheap. It all adds up, So, and yes, I do have a fund to be able to sort of, So even something like the Coronation airspace restrictions, we did some social media on that, and we put £1,000 paid advertising in Twitter onto it.
Excellent.
Now, that actually reaches an awful lot of people. I haven't got the full analysis yet, but when we've done it before, you're talking about 70, 80,000 people that will drop into their Twitter feed.
Brilliant.
So whether they follow us or not doesn't matter.
Yes.
It's those annoying tweets that you see that suddenly drop into your feed, and you think, I don't follow them. It's that. So and it's targeted. So we're talking about people who follow other drone accounts, people who talk about drones, people who mention drones in their profile. It's scary. You can, what you can do. So, we spent £1,000 reaching out to all of those tens and tens of thousands of people. So it's great value, but obviously that £1,000 comes from somewhere,
Yes, okay.
So it's out of all of that.
Sorry, I was just slightly late back from that one because I was just laughing at Andy Cortez, our senior moderator. 8 out of 10 drones said their cats preferred it. I love that. Comment of the evening so far. So I have a bit of a problem here, and we look at things like the Atoll campaign and how much that's pushed out, and obviously that's a lot of money. There's obviously a huge commercial aviation sector there in terms of pushing that out finance wise, and they all pay into it and everything else like that. But when they've made a profit of £2 million from the drone side of things in the CAA, from RPAS in the CAA in the last 2 financial years, surely there's enough budget there to start a proper campaign and to really start a mainstream Atoll style campaign where we can hit some people. I don't think that having and it's how I first met Jonathan, is his stand at DroneX, and I support these things of having these stands at shows and that type of thing, and at photography shows, etc. But I don't think you're hitting the problem user. I don't think you're hitting the occasional users that we're talking about, the people that will just rock up with a toy drone, which is actually a Mini 2 that needs registering, and just fly it during an air show, etc., that type of thing. I don't think we're hitting those kind of people at any of these shows with stands personally. And I just feel like there needs to be more of a general campaign. Certainly, going by the statistics on the registration side of things alone, the messaging isn't getting across to the right people, is it? Clearly.
No. And I mean, we were talking about Facebook groups, and immediately, because we're into it all, we think, they should put people within or at least commenting in the Facebook groups. Yeah. But the problem is that's commenting to people who are already asking the questions and discussing it and getting generally the right answers after a fashion. But they've got to be going to, I don't know, general photographers, people, walkers in the country who might buy a drone to go and fly somewhere, and they might be flying in the Mac loop.
I still think where we approach people, where we actually get hold of the user in terms of the capturing for that registration, I think that's still what's wrong. in terms of the education side of things. The problem then again is that once they then go into the system, I feel like it's overcomplicated and starts to confuse people, which is the bit that we're now going to come on to, which is page 19 of this particular report. As he says very smoothly going into the next section. Thank you. So the lack of awareness is also reflected by low awareness of what flyer IDs and operator IDs are. Now, remember, as per this little symbol over here, this is from the drone users. So this is from the 500 drone users. This is actually people who are out there actively using drones, apparently. Understanding of what a flyer ID and operator are. So what do you need to have if you own a drone? So 38% a flyer ID, 32% operator ID. What do you need to have if you fly a drone, whether it's yours or not? Only 19% on the flyer ID, 18% still think they need an operator ID. What do you need to have to sell drones? And I think you need these things to sell drones. Okay, so it's a very low number. And what do you need to fly light aircraft? Okay. Why is that question in there? It's interesting, isn't it? What do you need to have if you want to fly over built up areas? And again, a very small percentage think that. And the others are hardly worth mentioning, to have a drone business and that type of thing. So, and I wouldn't necessarily expect all drone users to know what you need to have a drone business, because that's where they start themselves researching, etc. So some interesting figures on that page. And then this one, users could be more motivated to register if the police started issuing fines, but also if they were granted access to fly in more places. So motivations for registering as a drone user amongst those not currently registered. So what would get those people registering? This is an interesting section. If the police started issuing on-the-spot fixed penalty notice fines for non-registered flyers, 38% of those people that haven't registered would now register. Now, I wonder why that question's in there.
Yeah, and I mean, exactly. It's not a surprise that that's quite a high percentage, because I think all the statistics show, all the studies have shown that whether you're like to commit a crime or whether there's likely to be crime is whether or not you're likely to be caught. So
Exactly. Although
caught, not necessarily the regulation.
Indeed. Although I would argue that actually one of the reasons why that's actually in this particular one is because, of course, as I have been talking about on this channel previously, the on the spot fixed penalty notice fines are coming. They're very much in the last stages. We have an interview with the NPCC counter drones boss, which is coming up on the channel either later this week or early next week, depending on when our mine and Graham's other interviews land. But in that we do talk about the fact that the on the spot fixed penalty notice fines are coming for drone users. So I think there will be a lot more of that, and actually there's a lot more happening behind the scenes in terms of actually it seems to be seen as one of the big enforcement things, which again I suppose it would do. So but there's certainly 38% of people who responded to this who weren't registered said they would if they were in place. If they were granted access to fly in more places, 36%. Well, you are granted more because you can fly full stop.
Access to fly.
Yeah. You can fly full stop. If other drone users were also registered, I don't understand.
Peer group pressure.
I don't. I think that's a strange one personally.
Can we, if we flicked back to that the first image on the thing, if I told you to throw your drone off a cliff, would you do it?
Oh, the first page thing. Yes.
The first image on the. Yeah. I won't let you go back to it.
If other drone users were registered, receive regular news on drones, 27%. So 27% of people said they would register if they got more news about drones.
It's not hard to get more news on drones, is it?
No, but it's an answer. I feel like these are answers which are fed, and then they said yes, that would make you register more, rather than being actually answers of what would make you register. Because you wonder if some of them would actually say, well, nothing would make me register. So because
and to be honest, if that's fed in, and that's fed in by somebody in the CAA, and I'll be as respectful as I can, if it's receive regular news on drones from the CAA, that might be more likely to put them to sleep than get them excited about drones, I would say, just because of the style of delivery. I'm not sure if that is, I'm sorry.
That's a bit harsh.
I've got Skywise.
There are over 200 people watching this right now, so there's clearly an appetite for people wanting to discuss these things, but slightly harsh. If I gained respect from the public that I knew the drone rules, 25%.
That's interesting, isn't it? That's 25%, because that's high for these sort of responses, and actually you do see people. I was discussing with one earlier on in Facebook about wanting to get together a group of people in his village in the local park and show them what drone flying's about, and explain that he knows the regulations and that those regulations exist. So
and entry into competitions 21%. Interesting. I think that might be something that's coming actually, and none of these I have no intention of registering. So 17% of these people were subscribed to XJet. It would appear. Love you, Bruce.
And although the CAA promised it was an anonymous survey, obviously it isn't, and the police will be knocking at your door later.
Yeah.
In the 70%.
Yeah, indeed. Now, this next tile is obviously on what kind of news they want to hear, which I'm not. You can download this report later. There'll be a link after the show and have a look at that. I'm not that interested in the minuscules there, because I think that's one definitely for the comms team only, as it were. But in terms of the interview with Jonathan, there's another clip, which is probably the last clip, which I'm going to play out this evening. There are actually more clips to this interview. I'm going to put those together and actually release them as the full interview, probably over this coming weekend. It will go up to members first during the week. But let's just wrap up those comments with Jonathan, and we'll come back and discuss the next section of this report. It is, of course, the age-old question of how do we reach people, and how do we get to that person as they're picking that drone up off the shelf to say, hey, you need to register that, you need to do X, Y, Z, which of course is the age-old question within this industry at the moment. And interestingly, within the report, it does that does come across. It comes across in quite an interesting way, because in one sense, and I suppose this is where you get the value from independent data from, because in one sense, people were saying that they didn't understand the existing regulations. So there was confusion over flyer ID, operator ID, and how that breaks down. But then there was also over 60 and I think 68% between the two groups of people that actually felt that there should be more drone rules, that there should be more regulation, which is interesting, because of course, perhaps what's needed more is more education of the existing rules, and then perhaps they would feel that there are enough, if that makes sense. And I often feel like that's kind of the sort of the feeling I get when I see things like drone within 5 meters of EasyJet plane and that type of thing over Gatwick, etc., and those kind of reports, where actually there's a lack of understanding in terms of how that reporting is even put together, so that actually you can't understand the subject matter. In terms of that higher percentage of people sort of saying, we feel that there should be more drone regulations in place. Does the CAA look deeper from the point of view of saying, actually, you've also said you're kind of discredited in that because you've also said you don't understand the existing stuff?
Yeah. So don't worry. So every time we get something like that, it's interesting as well, but I think there was a lot of people said registration has made drone flying safer.
Yes.
And when we talk to drone users, that's okay. There are some people who say that, but there's also a big portion who go, well, they challenge that.
Yes.
So I would say, yes, I would say, a long time ago, good regulators realised, if they work in safety, that more rules don't make things safer necessarily. Okay, so you need rules, you need regulations, because not everybody wants to comply, and you need to protect people. And everything we do is about protecting consumers. Now, in the commercial world, that's obviously the fare paying passenger, but it's also unintended third party. So people that could be affected badly by something going wrong that they had no part in, if you like. So they're always a key thing. So but we realised a long time ago that actually education is the way to make people safer. Yeah, so you need rules to protect people, and then you gain the extra through the education. It's something we started doing with the private flying general aviation world a long time ago. We did a report, quite a technical report, where we actually went out and looked at other nations and other systems, not just in aviation, and actually sort of almost statistically came to the conclusion that more rules is not making things safer once you reach a certain level. You reach a certain level of safety by rules, and then you go beyond that with education and safety promotion and that kind of stuff. So yeah, absolutely, we get that, we understand that, and that's what we've been doing for a while in sort of all sectors that we work in, if you like. The ASOL thing's a little bit different because it's more based around a legal requirement.
Yes, no, indeed, absolutely. Yeah, to me, it is just the it's kind of from a PR and a marketing point of view. It's such a great example of how positive messaging can work, and also get the buy-in of absolutely everybody within an industry. And of course, it is unique in itself in terms of what it's able to do and what it's able to.
And it's in their interest as well. So if you're a tour operator, it's in your interest to promote the fact that you, by law, have to financially protect your holidays when some other people selling flights, etc., don't. So look what we're offering extra kind of idea. Yeah, even though we've got to by law. Yeah,
exactly. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us today on that. We're going to continue the rest of this live show discussing this with myself and my co-host Graham, and we'll no doubt have some more questions to put across to you guys as feedback from the audience as this goes out. But it's a really interesting document, and I think it's fascinating to see that the CAA are tracking this type of information and obviously gaining the information independently. It's interesting to see the sort of the cogs turning behind the scenes, as it were. So it's been an interesting exercise in those terms. We've obviously got a very busy 2023 coming up with the open category investigation and all of the wonderful public consultations which will be rolling off the back of that. Do you have any news in terms of when they might be, when we might start seeing information on those?
No timings yet. So very, very initial work underway. But yes, I mean, like everything we do, as you saw with the class mark stuff and all of that, there will be very, very, hopefully easy to understand, easy to follow consultations. We'll go out, we'll do our podcasts, we'll talk to you guys, that kind of thing, to try and explain. And, as we saw from the class marks, we do listen. So it's absolutely, definitely, please do take part in those consultations, because they will influence what we do.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for joining us. I really appreciate it. And I want to say thank you again to Jonathan for joining us. I do appreciate him spending the time and actually breaking down what this report is and how they use it and that type of thing. And it's good to have this level of transparency in those terms. We may not be happy with what we're reading, but at least we're getting to see what they're seeing and that type of thing. So I think it's very good from that point of view. So thank you, Jonathan. And he was talking about the public consultations. Certainly here on Geeksvana, we're going to be talking about that a lot come the summer. Once they start coming out for the open category investigation. So if you're not subscribed, do subscribe. So next up, I want to talk about the next part of this section of this report, which is innovation. I'm going to take a quick look through this one. So apparently there is no real change in expectations for drones in the next 5 years from the general public. Accessing hard to reach areas is the priority. Okay, I understand that. So expected drone uses in 5 years' time, and we were talking before, and this is one from the UK public as it's showing here on the right hand side. We were talking before, Graham, that we weren't sure whether or not this is something which is these topics were fed to the public, or whether they've just randomly come up with them.
There's some, I mean, there are some ones in there you'd expect to see from members of the public. There's some odd ones in there, and I tell you what, there's a staggering one missing from that list, which is probably the biggest use of drones professionally, which is what this is talking about, and that's surveys.
Yeah.
In this search and rescue, this inspection of power lines, very specific inspection of power lines, but not survey, not general building survey.
I think.
But that's where people will have seen drones being used in a town centre.
Potentially, or perhaps not. Perhaps that's our perception of because it's something that we're heavily involved in and that type of thing, and perhaps and we know a lot of people that do this side of things, but perhaps it isn't in the public perception. It'd be interesting. I will reach out to Opinion in the CAA and ask how these are actually generated. But so traffic monitoring has gone down very slightly, but very consistent. Search and rescue, you'd expect that to be up there. Medicine delivery to remote areas, which again shows PR, because that's very much one of the things with all of the wonderful trials during COVID and everything else like that happened. That shows that's got across as a positive message. Military use, okay, well again that's obviously in the news an awful lot. Filming, media, transport of organs between audience, agriculture, and then it drops off down to disease control at the bottom. So it's kind of in the order that I would expect them to be in. It tells me that you can sell a message to the public. So actually, if there was such a thing as an Atoll for Drones type campaign, and we did actually put a few 100,000, really did put a more hefty viral campaign out there, that actually it could do something. It could actually, penetrate this list in terms of actually one of the expected drone uses in the next 5 years' time is relaxation. Is FPV as a recreational sport, that type of thing, and the benefits of that.
And that may explain the lack of surveying, because generally speaking, the companies doing that work, generally speaking, are small companies. They're not companies with a big lobby behind them.
No.
They're people with drones have gone out, set up a little business doing drone surveys.
Yes, but
they're not grown and are targeting government and lobbying and getting in the press.
But as Jonathan was saying in the interview, that those kind of drone flights are very much the clickbaity thing that news organisations love, because it fills 5 minutes of airtime, it fills a couple of pages on their websites and that type of thing. They're ready-made, positive, fluff pieces, news stories. And I think that's what we need to start getting the drone rules within, is starting to get those across as fluff pieces to say, hey, look what you can do with this simple drone registration and the abilities it gives you in terms of legal flight is concerned. Just my personal opinion. So the next part is the public expect the biggest increases in drone usage to be around deliveries, transport, and wait for it. Do you want to say the next one? Because I know you're...
Can I? Personal storm and weather forecasting. And I can only assume that's, I don't know, putting your Mini up and see if it blows away. There's a storm. It's like the rock outside. When it's wet, it's rain.
We do get...
I'm baffled.
We do get some bizarre stuff back on these reports sometimes, as is the whole nature of, obviously, public surveys. But I do feel like if we were playing Family Fortunes... I do feel like that would be one of the ones that would catch everyone. On Family Fortunes, occasionally it would get down to the bottom and everyone's used their lives up. All right, let's see what the fifth one was. It is personal storm and weather forecasting, and everyone and all the families sort of look at each other. What even is that? And actually, what even is that with drones? I don't actually comprehend.
Didn't a while ago, didn't Ordnance Survey put up a very, very high flying drone? I'm thinking 80,000 feet.
Yeah.
But
Well,
but I assume that was for mapping, not for.
No, indeed. Yeah.
Not for the and satellites are gathering this data. It's only data.
Well, there's the whole thing of weatherproofing as well. The fact that as soon as the weather gets 5% change, you then can't fly that drone. But anyway, let's ignore that technology can't actually keep up with that kind of thing. But somewhere in an office somewhere, there is a guy who has built a personal weather forecasting system for his drone that is
Do you know what it is?
Is taking this report to his boss and saying, look at that, I got us market penetration.
And that is by taking a Mini and sticking a piece of seaweed on it.
I mean, technically, you have a product there.
Seaweed and a pine cone, you've got all you need.
Don't dismiss it. That could be the future of IR Aerial. Okay, and the next tile, which is one of the last ones, which is deliveries and transport, are expected to become even more popular over the next 20 years. Are they popular now? But they're expected to become even more. So services are expected to grow most of the next 10 years. Number one is commercial deliveries. I don't dispute that. I quite like that title, commercial deliveries, because I don't think, drone delivery isn't in the way that a lot of people think that's going to be, of little parcels, etc. I don't think it's necessarily going to be huge growth in the next, certainly not the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, but certainly commercial deliveries with drones, yes. But we're talking about almost aircraft, really. They are fixed wing aircraft going between small airports, which are just happen to be drone in terms of their technical definition. As an aircraft, they are drones, but for all other purposes they are electric aircraft.
Without a driver.
Exactly. Personal storm and weather forecasting is there at number 3, just for Graham. I think we need to keep. We need to track that story for Graham on the channel.
A huge boost, 24% to 38%, and then it stops. Nobody wants to know what the weather's doing in
20 years' time.
19 years' time.
Perhaps they think we'll all be living underwater by then. But
the weather as a nation,
So obviously transport, e.g. air taxi, personal transport, that kind of thing. Again, there's lots of PR about that kind of thing. Cargo flights, yay. Disease control, okay. Personal home security. Well done, Amazon, with their Ring doorbell, their Ring drone there, I suppose. Repairing utility services, okay, very, very, very specific. Drone entertainment, things like the light shows, that's starting to get some penetration, obviously, and environmental monitoring.
Yeah, but definitely no survey work.
No, that's right. No generic survey work.
Head on the line, that is.
And I did just want to give a very quick a nod there to Jordan Wood, who's the associate director at Opinium, who did carry out this report. And yes, but there will be a link to this report in the chat below. To me, I find actually the information that has come from existing drone users to be the most interesting from this report. I don't know about you, and actually the most concerning. And I think it shows that, whether it's because the audience they're trying to reach is changing fundamentally, or what is happening, the messaging clearly needs to change.
I strongly suspect if all of this was brought in, I don't know, when I sort of started 2015, 16, then it would have taken root amongst the community, because there wouldn't have been any sub 250s.
Yes.
It's the sub 250 which has made it possible to for the Argos buyer to go and get the thing, and that just essentially skews the results, because those people are tough to reach.
They are,
unless you had something like an EASA regulation, whereby when you had a C-class drone, and they are now coming out, you had to have a piece of paper in with every drone sold, which is a requirement of the C marking system. But of course we haven't got that, so there's definitely no need to do that.
Yes. Well, now
solve the problem.
Bear in mind, we do have this open category investigation coming up, which is going to be a fundamental look at the open category, which will obviously therefore include drone registration and all of this kind of stuff. And I think when they look at these stats, I think this report in itself is something to throw at that public consultation, to throw back their own report, as it were. And I hope they don't mind if I refer to it as a CAP document in my responses to the consultations, but that's the easiest way to refer to them. But
you're a very
naughty boy for calling it a CAP document. Yes, but I think this kind of data is very important in terms of where it's going, and I think it means that this consultation that's coming is even more important, because we need to make the open category fit for purpose for all the users. So we need to have the focus, in my opinion, on reaching the people who are not complying for all sorts of reasons. We then need to start trusting this huge group of people in the middle who do comply, who register, who are safe, who've been flying for years, who know what they're doing. Stop hitting them over the head with regs and changes designed to try and reach these few people down here who aren't going to listen anyway, frankly. And perhaps the whole thing of the police tickets and that type of thing, perhaps that will deal with a lot of those people, but hitting all these middle ground people isn't there. And then of course you have the higher echelon, the OSC users, the large company, the large companies with multiple pilots, etc. Those guys again need to be trusted that bit more, and that's where I think this whole system needs to change along. And I think that starts with the foundations of changing the open category, personally.
Yeah, absolutely. And we discussed this a while ago when we were probably not far off when our relationship first started.
Oh, are you reminiscing?
Started to bloom.
Are
I
you
am.
reminiscing when
I
when
want
the
a, I
bromance
want a,
started?
I want a little thought bubble coming out with picture of us skipping through the daisies. But I'm
Skipping through
thinking back to when
Dronex.
I rewrote that. And I remember it fondly. Essentially, Cap 2012
Yes.
to show how it could be structured slightly differently, and it essentially encompass everything up to specific category users. Whether we get anywhere like that, God only knows. We'll find out. But yeah, it's there are changes that could be made. This data is incredibly useful, and actually, what what this doesn't tell me is whether or not the public are for or against drones.
Yeah, and actually, it's something that came up for us earlier in our conversations when we were discussing this show, and it's something that XJet put in the chat earlier, which was they should have asked the public, "Do you consider drones annoying?" And we didn't seem to get that kind of. Now, I don't know whether when this tracker started, whether that was even a question. So actually, whether it was something that was even in their sort of remit. Obviously, they've changed things, they've added things, and I think that should be something which should be in there. Are you afraid of drones? Why are you afraid of drones? Where are your fears? What are your concerns? Because going by this, it doesn't seem the public mind drones. They're actually very, very positive about them, frankly.
Yeah. There's nothing. Well, depending on where those answers come from about what drone use will expand, because it doesn't mention voyeurism and peeping toms in there. But it is, it is incredibly frustrating that we don't have that emotional part in there, because claims are made by the CAA about those which impact people in the specific category.
Yes.
And that is not fair if the data isn't there. And this, to me, is where they're getting the data from.
Yeah, so this and other areas certainly. But you know, absolutely, as Jonathan said in the interview, this is certainly something that they use because they see it as hitting those minimum benchmarks in terms of being a cross reference of the nation, basically. So it's a really interesting report from that point of view. But again, 2023 is going to be such an important year for drone use in the UK, and that is going to start with this open category investigation, the consultations which will come out of the back of that. Now, I haven't been concentrating on the chat much. Normally we pull up chat messages and we're sort of referring, and I didn't ask people to tag us this evening, mainly because we had an awful lot of stuff to get through. But we will be having one of our live Q&As coming up again very, very soon, probably certainly within the next couple of weeks. And I've seen some questions coming up in the chat, and we will have an opportunity to do that in the future. I do go back and read all the comments as well. But thank you, PG, for your £10 super chat. Thanks to Sean and the team for keeping us up to date with this stuff. The CAA don't. Well, yes, I mean, you know, I got this through Skywise, I will be fair to say. So I did get this through the system that they use, but I appreciate it. And I understand the sentiment as well, PG, but thank you. I really appreciate your direct financial support there. It is much appreciated. And I can confirm that Graham gets 0.01% of all super chats.
Which is why I'm in my studio rather than a studio.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. We're still raising funds to get Graham out of his bathroom.
That's it.
But yeah, no, it's been a really interesting topic, and again, I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening, because when we started this channel, and we started to have the more sort of the fun live streams, the silly live streams sort of thing, I found that kind of content quite frustrating, and I was always told that there isn't an appetite for people to come and sit and talk seriously about this industry and this hobby, and take things apart and want to know. And the fact that we had over 200 people as our peak tonight shows me that that's incorrect. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to congratulate the audience for the fact that they are an absolutely fantastic group of people who engage, and I look forward to taking apart the public consultation with you later this summer, and really hopefully start to make some inroads in terms of actually having something that we want in terms of airspace. PG saying, I'll take back my money if Graham gets a penny. Only joking, or am I? I'll tell you what, Peter, I will withdraw his penny for you.
That's
There
it.
you go.
Yeah. Thanks,
Live
thanks.
controversy on air. There we go. But can I just ask, of the 160 or so people that are still watching, we're up to 93 likes. Could a few more people, one more person hit it? Could a few more people hit that so it's 100 likes before we go off air? I'd really appreciate that. But yes, but Graham, thank you for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for turning up and sticking with
Indeed,
us.
if you want to see more of Graham, you can become a member on our channel. He is the specific category editor, and he's already made lots of content for the very specific network part of our membership area. There's there's videos, there's downloads, there's all sorts of bits and pieces in there to help you, particularly if you're flying in the specific category, but also if you're flying commercially in the open category as well. There is also a link to Graham's website, Editorial, in the description as well. If you're thinking about getting an OSC or you want some general regulation consultancy, that type of thing, Graham is 100% your man. He's the guy that I turn to when I have questions as well. So that should hopefully tell you something that I know less than Graham is probably what it tells you. But yeah, his link's in the description. I almost pulled off a good advert for you there.
We bounce off each other on the regs, don't we? We one of us will see something, have a question, think, hold on a minute,
yes,
quick, clip it and paste it and send it across. Is this right? Have I understood this right?
Indeed.
If we both agree it's right.
Exactly. Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. I really do appreciate it. Thank you again, Graham, and we'll see you next time on Geeksvana, which will actually be, for sure, I might be uploading something tomorrow, but for sure, we'll be back on Thursday with the exclusive launch of the new Drone Assist app, which will be a little unboxing explanation video, and then a live stream here in the studio with the guys from Altitude Angel. So I'm really looking forward to that one. The links will go live tomorrow, so you can start setting your reminders. But I'm really looking forward to that one. So yes, I will see you then. Thank you, Graham.
Yay.
I do take a long time to say goodbye, don't I?
You do.
Goodbye.